I appreciate the privilege to speak to the bar today. I noticed Michelle, when Ricky Avery called me, he asked me to speak on this is my 45th year practicing law, some things I learned. I use the expression in the law firm, Peg, as you know, load them and unload them every day. It means you got to get the work in, you got to get some out. I do it every day. Then I noticed when Michelle sent out the notice about my coming, it was called loading them and unloading them another day at the docks. It reminds me of an incident that occurred in college to me. I just thought of that. A fellow from this county was in college with me, and we studied Bible under Dr. R.J. Martin. He's the one that married my dear wife and me, and he had the knots so strong Houdini couldn't get out of my knot. Anyway, we studied Bible, and 50% of the exam was always to trace Paul's journeys. And we go to Antioch, Macedonia, Corinth, and it was a good thing. That was always, had been for years. 50% was to trace Paul's journeys. The other 50%, and was just whatever he asked us, you see. So we had that memorized. I could take the ship, and he tells us to start at one point. This year, he started another point. You had to either trace it forward or backwards to get all the way around. And I had it memorized. I actually did. I could do it. I'd studied this fellow, and he could do it too. Well, he came in there and he gave us the short answer. And he always went up to the blackboard with a little frock-tail coat on, and he put on there, trace Paul's journeys, 50 points. We went up to the blackboard, and I'd already started to write. He put on the blackboard the following words: discuss and criticize a sermon on the mount. I knew it was in red letters in Mama's Bible, and we heard a little bit about it. I knew 50 points. I knew I was up against it. I mean, that was the half of the whole exam. Well, I wrote best I could do. I knew something about the Beatitudes. I interspersed all sorts of biblical stuff in there, just trying to hit on some of the things. And my friend, he stayed in there about, half an hour is an hour, no, about an hour. It's a 2-hour exam. And he left. I saw him get up and leave. I thought he'd just give up, he'd quit. I went back to the dorm, and I said to him, we'll call him Jack, because some of you may know him. I said, Jack, what in the world did you do? I said, you didn't know any more about that than I did, or you probably didn't do it. What'd you do? Well, he said, I'll tell you what I did. He says, I didn't know enough to write a damn thing about it. Well, I said, what'd you do? He says, I just started my paper off. Some people can discuss and criticize the Sermon on the Mount if they want to, but as for me, I prefer to trace Paul's journey. And he made an A in that class. He made an A in that class. So regardless of what assignment you have given me, I prefer to talk about some of the things that I've learned or I've encountered during my years in practicing law. Just last evening, I attended a wonderful event here in Morgan wherein they selected the Teacher of the Year. It was a first-class affair at the Baptist Church. The person that won it was Kim Baker, who teaches mentally handicapped students, and I was so impressed with her. I was pleased my granddaughter Jillian was the only student on the 5-person selection committee, which is probably the highest honors for throwing her bob during her high school days. She seems to love her work. She made some comments along that line after I talked to her. And it kind of talking about like me, I love my work. I'm not burned out, boys and girls. I am not burned out at all. I was anxious to go to the law firm this morning, not knowing what was going to come in, and some of the things I knew weren't the best thing in the world to work on them, but I didn't mind. I still look forward to going to the law firm. Larry knows that. My enthusiasm's still with you. I haven't got the energy I used to have, but I got enough to make me through the day. I used to say the old song, help me make it through the night. And now I say in the morning, help me make it through the day. I say every morning, though, truthfully, when I get up, this is the day the Lord has made. Let me rejoice and be glad in it. Now, I start out that way. Sometimes, as Larry or Michelle or Peggy or any of them know, by 10:15, I've forgotten that admonition, but I started out. I sure do. During the They showed last night on that teacher, they showed all the teachers that had been nominated, some 28 or whatever number of schools there are in Burke County. Had a great presentation on a huge screen. And in the background music was the music of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And I kept hearing that. It was off to work we go, off to work we go. And I lay in the bed last night thinking about that. Hi ho, off to work we go. All except Grumpy, you know, he didn't want to do it, he wasn't satisfied. I'm concerned that the lawyers and people in America, not just lawyers, people that do all types of professions, that they get up some mornings thinking, I owe, that's why I'm off to work, you know. And that's sad. Larry had handed to me just this morning a article written by Ken Barfield, I believe that's right, Garfield, who used to be a reporter here for the Morgan News Herald some 20-odd years ago. He's now a feature writer for Charlotte Observer. It was last Tuesday, I forget what day it was. I suggest you read it. He makes a tremendous point in there that if you don't enjoy your work, it doesn't turn you on, you're cheating yourself out of life. Because a third of your life about is sleeping or trying to sleep. The other third, or a little third plus, is your profession or work, whatever it is. So if you don't enjoy your work, you're just not getting out of life what you ought to. It'll affect you in your home life, it'll affect you afterwards. Read that article. I don't know whether I brought it or not. Larry threw it on my desk this morning. It's worth your reading. I don't have it, but it's worth your reading. Oh, I do have it. It was, let's see when it was. I cut it out. It doesn't show the date on it. Charlotte Service several days ago. A point well made. And it says in that article, and I believe in it, if you don't enjoy what you're doing, and if you don't get don't have enthusiasm for it, particularly we lawyers that have a trained profession and a law degree, go do something else, your law degree. I've had a great number of people around 40 years of age come to my office who are not happy with what they're doing. They're burned out. And I've helped several of them get jobs where they now seem to be happy. And their whole life's changed. You just don't have to do what you're doing the rest of your life. If you like it, do it. But if it's not turning you on, you're not enthused about it, use your ability to do something else and live life. You only live it one time. You can't back up. I want to share with you a few tidbits that I put together. Not necessarily in a good chronological order if you're writing a theme or something. I never was much at that. Jimmy Irving was the guy that did all that for us, you know. Oh, by the way, before I forget, I'll just take a minute and digress. I spoke to the Burke Historical Society Tuesday night and made a 35, 40-minute talk about the history of the courthouses in Burke County. But I'll give you just a thumbnail sketch since we're all lawyers. The first courthouse in Burke County was not a courthouse. It was Mr. Smith's house down in Longview. That's when Burke County went all the way to the Tennessee River. And that's where they held first court in his home. The first courthouse building for Lincoln, Wilkes, Taba, 7 counties, don't remember them all, was Larry, just beyond the bridge on 64 going down toward Drum Strait, just beyond the bridge there under the railroad, about where Doc's dugout dug, you know, that honky-tonk that you and I went to as young lawyers, you know, it's now a fireplace on the left. It was up there on that hill. It was a plank courthouse. Then the second courthouse they built was made of plank also. It's now where the old Cornwall drugstore used to be. It's now 100 West Union, the clothing store. It likewise was built out of plank. Then they built a plank courthouse over on the courthouse square, not exactly where our courthouse is, but on that lot. By the way, when they laid that out, it was 12 rods square. I believe that's 198 feet, 16 and a half feet. I figured that out. And I knew, remember, I asked you, and you said you weren't sure. And I said, well, I'm going to take top luck on it, but I was still insecure about it. This historical speech had to be more than just my rambling. It had to have some facts in it. So I looked it up, and I was right. And that's what it was. Then the fourth courthouse was made out of stone from Mr. Forney's farm out here toward Clearwater Beach, or off this park, hauled in there. And by the way, his granddaughter was at the speech the other night, and they've come back and retired from out of town, and they're getting ready to build a home And they can still see the big crevice or hole where the stone was came from. She came up and talked to me later. And then, of course, we built the new courthouse about 1977 down there in 2 phases. One now where the Board of Elections, where the tax office is. And we had a courtroom in there at that time, Gary. I don't know if you were here or not at that time. Then we built the new one up there, and we now have 5 courtrooms, 3 on the top floor of the big courthouse, Master's Court, and 1 in the new addition. That's the history of the courthouses. I'm just going to read out some things that came to my mind as I thought about this in the last couple of weeks, or couple of months since Ricky called me, and I'm sorry he's not here because his mother is in grave condition, and a dear friend of ours. 2 lawyers are better than 1. Never turn down a chance for somebody to help you in a lawsuit. Never. I don't care if you think you're not much of a lawyer. Not much of a lawyer is better not having a lawyer at all. So if somebody wants to help you in a lawsuit and a client wants to pay them, welcome and work on it. The better you prepare, the better your luck is. There's no question about that. The better you prepare, the better your luck will be. It reminds me of the Houdini, Harry Houdini, and I love him. Every time it's on TV about him, these old things, I'll go find it. Even my son Dixon will say he saw where Harry Houdini is going to be on one of these oddball cables. He's dead now, of course, you know, great magician. He'll call me. That's the 3 Stooges. That's my favorite. I've got the 3 Stooges in my office, you know, in there. Everybody can see it. You know that, Sandy.
You referring to the picture on the wall.
Well, that's not what I took off. No, we may have, thank you, Larry, we may have more than 3 in there. But Harry Houdini, you know, he could pull a rabbit out of the hat. That was one of his first tricks. Well, I used that in a talk one time. And it's applicable to preparing a case. Number 1, you've got to know how to put the rabbit in the hat. You've got it was put in there for him. You've got to put it in the hat. Number 2, you've got to then remember it's in the hat. You've got to remember that you've got something over here that you've put in your brain or in your file. And number 3, you've got to know how to get it out of there, either by your notes or your brain. And 4th, you've got to know when to pull it out. But if you haven't put the rabbit in the hat, you cannot pull it out. And you can put a lot of rabbits in your file, and that's all right. But if you don't put them in there, you can't pull them out, Russ. It's got to be in your brain or in your file. So the better prepared, the better off you are. I think preparing a lawsuit is a lot like conducting an orchestra. You're the director. Larry's kind of director now. I'm kind of the director emeritus in some of these major lawsuits.
You're the conductor now.
That's how I got it. I'm the conductor, yeah. But it's a lot like that. You have to put the parts together, and you need a theme in a lawsuit. You've got to figure out, where am I trying to go? Not just go off and, you know, Confucius says, he that chases 2 rabbits won't catch either one of them. You've got to have a theme and know where you're going. And before you file a civil lawsuit, if you haven't done it before, go to the books and find out what the law is. Go to the judge's charge book. Larry's taught me that. Larry won't do a thing to go see that charge book. I mean, he knows that's what the judge is going to say the law is. So you've got to fit your facts into it. Read the advance sheets, the things that you're interested in. Don't read them all. I just read car wrecks and insurance claims and estates and a few things that I do. I don't read all the other stuff, but do that. It doesn't take long. And that newsletter and the Lawyer's Weekly gives you a little thumbnail. We read them and keep them. And I read them and I pass a note, Larry, read this. Becky, I do, read this. And that's the way you just keep up. Then if it's something catches your mind, a lot of times I'll say to Larry, he and I work so close together, wasn't that something there about a month? Yeah, it was. Well, we go to Vanessa and we go to find it. She'll find it, or one of us will. And then we'll call down and get the actual case. And it's so helpful to you on the new points of law that come down. All of us make mistakes in practice of law, particularly errors of judgment. Errors of judgment. That's what lawyers do, is judgment. I've been involved in 2 terrible errors in my law practice. Errors of judgment. I mean, just with client's consent, we just called it wrong. One of them was a case that Harold Mitchell had originally, a wrongful death case. A good case, Sunday school teacher, husband, nice fellow, no children. clear-cut case of negligence by a trucking company, unequivocally, no question about negligence. Wrong with that case. She's a teacher. Everything is just, we had it all. Harold did. He called me about 2 weeks before the trial and asked me if I wanted to appear in that trial. I'd heard about it. I knew it was going to be the biggest trial at that time in Burke County. You know what I said, Harold. I said, I ain't got nothing much to do next couple of weeks. And I sure will. Come on up here and bring me a file. I was just enthused. I couldn't even work my yard that weekend. I was reading that file. And we was trying that case out. Charlie Dixon and Glenn Harper defended. About the 4th day of the trial, well, before the trial started, Saturday morning, the client came in to see me. I had not even seen the husband before. I didn't even know what he looked like. He came to my office on Saturday morning. He says, Mr. Byrd, says, I think I want to tell you something. He said, I want you to know it, and I don't want to go tell Mr. Mitchell. He says, you can tell him, but I don't want to tell him. I said, what is it? Well, he says, I got married about 2 weeks ago. I thought, oh my God, so you had no children is issue. There goes your consortium, that's the big apple. Well, I filed a motion to Judge Burke all days on you, but the judge sitting to try to keep that out of evidence. But he finally ruled, and I think properly so, that anything that relates to a factor about consortium agreement is confident. He let it in. But we soft-pedaled it and got along pretty good with it, and he hadn't been running around or anything. It was about 2 years before the trial came on. It didn't sound too bad. I mean, it seemed to kind of be all right. On Thursday, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, as I recall, they offered us $475,000 to settle that lawsuit. That's been about 15 years ago, Tom. That's a lot of money. Well, they had cross-examined the father of the dead girl pretty heavy. I don't know why they did, but they did. And he got mad about that. I mean, he just got emotional. So we took that offer to him. They'd offered $100, I believe, before the trial started to Harold. Anyway, we met with him, and I wasn't anxious to try it out. I mean, settle it because the trucking company from Chicago had $1 million coverage, solvent, and we was going to ring the bell. It's going to go bong, bong all over that courthouse about Friday afternoon. We turned it down. We tried it out. In comes the jury. Well, no, the jury didn't come in Friday. It got Friday afternoon. Harold had to go to Baptist Hospital to have a couple of little moles or something trimmed by Dr. Howell off his face. I said, how are you going? You supposed to go there and sit. There's nothing we can do. The jury's going to come in. I've already got a judgment drawn to fill in the mounds. No, I just put the ink to it, and I'll call you if it comes in while you're down there. Not, I'll stay with him Saturday night, and I'll call you at home or at the hospital. Well, in comes the verdict. I said, I was expecting it good enough. In comes the verdict. And the foreman said, 40. Well, Judge Sitton, and I thought he meant 400 thou. I thought, and Judge Sitton says, now you mean, sir, 400, comma, 003, don't you? He said, no, sir, I mean 4000. And he said, well, that's what it says. Is that your verdict? And we thought, yes, it was, $40,000. That's what we got. I called to the Baptist Hospital. Harold was down there, and he'd already had his, but he was in the little recovery room but alert. And they said, do you need to speak to him? I said, no, just pass him a note. Well, that's what I did. That is true. I said, just, although they hadn't admitted negligence, we knew we'd win it. I says, we've, tell Harold that the jury found the defendant negligent, and we've won our case. He took a note. And he says, bring me a portaphone. Says, I want to talk to Mr. Byrd about it. Well, I had then told him that what had happened is $40,000. Dr. Howell came in about that time. We were going to let him come on. He said to Dr. Howell, he said, if you don't mind, give me another damn shot. I want to face that thing. So that was a mistake of judges. But our clients that never fussed about it, they were willing to roll the dice, and we were too, and so be it. Needless to say, I didn't make much. I think my fee was a half of whatever we got over 50,000. But we did get some entries, and Judge Sitton pressured them a little bit. We finally got them to pay $90,000. The other mistake that I made with consent of client, Joe and I made it together, was a murder case. Question of self-defense on our client's property. Fuss between our client's daughter and her husband, the son-in-law, and she moved over with Daddy, and just a typical bus. He come over there about half drunk, the father-in-law had, and was running his mouth and so forth. And one word led to another, and our defense was he came on us with a stick or something, and we shot him and killed him. And on our property, we had a pretty good case. Frank Patton was employed in private prosecution. His assist was as follows. And Frank had a pretty good sense of what the jury might do. He came to me after about half a day or a day of the trial and said, Bob, says, I've talked to our clients, says if your client would enter a plea of involuntary manslaughter, we'd recommend suspended sentence if your client would give my son, the dead man's son, the custody of the children. Well, we talked to our client about it. He said, well, I ain't about to do that. And we're living with her, and she wouldn't do it. So we tried it out. And the jury found him guilty as charged of second-degree murder, and he built 12 years. But it's all, that's errors of judgment. You just don't know. You got to know when to hold them. You got to know when to fold them. You got to know when to walk away, and you got to know when to run. But there's no book to look into. That's a great gambler story record, you know, Ann. Cross-examination of clients, of adverse parties. Don't ever quit your cross-examination on a question you've asked and the court has sustained it. Ask something else that you've got to say yes to. I don't care if it's what day of the week is. Don't ever stop on a defeat, on an error, so to speak. Don't ever do that. That just leaves like well, the judge just stopped you and that's anything else, he didn't have nothing else. Always ask something. If you lose on the objection, Russ, you ask a question that's sustained. Why, don't quit. Ask some more things just like there's nothing to that. Say, thank you, Your Honor, and just go right on, just like he's done you a favor, you know. I want to share with you a true instance. Years ago, as many of you know, at one time, Joe and I had 13 homicide cases pending in these mountain counties at one time. 13 separate homicide cases. And the ones we pled self-defense, we do reasonably well, or get involuntary manslaughter, sometimes second, but some of them we never had a guy get first degree of death yet. I can buy that. I don't think I want to appear to nothing. I don't want to run about my luck. Anyway, I'm going to leave that. I might reveal now. I'm going to leave that where it is. All I'm going to tell you. Judge Sneff was presiding over a homicide case in Caldwell County. It was a question of identification. It was at a Bawdy House brawl. The lights went out, and people got hit with 2x4s, and some got cut, the fellow got hit with some sort of instrument, got killed. And it's a question of, they picked out our client as the one that did the killing. Our client swore he didn't hit anybody. He said he got the hell knocked out of him. He didn't hit anybody. But a couple of witnesses were insinuating it's him. He was in the vicinity where the fellow fell. And nobody said they actually saw him hit now. It's pretty circumstantial. Charlie Whitman was the FBI agent. He was always such an honorable fellow. Doug, you remember him well. He'd always tell just what he knew or what he was told. He didn't come to assist the prosecutor, Gary. He just told what he knew. Well, I knew it was a close call as to whether or not the state had enough evidence to get by the motion for non-suit. I knew it was going to be close. I could tell. And Sneff was a pretty domineering judge, you know, but I loved him. I liked him because if you prepared, he liked it. If you didn't, he'd just run through you. Remember that, Doug? I mean, that's the truth, isn't it?
Yeah, I never had the lawyers scared.
Had them nearly all scared. I loved it. He didn't have me scared because I did what I knew he wanted you to do. That's what you must do in court. You got to know the judges. And you got to do whatever they expect you to do, even if you don't think they're right. They're the referee. Anyway, they finished the state's evidence about 12:20, and I made a motion. No, it came to say this. It came my time to cross-examine Charlie Whitman. He was the last witness. And I didn't know what to do about him. I just didn't know. And I sit there kind of thumping my fingers on the desk. Mr. Burke, proceed. I knew if I didn't ask anything and my client lost, he'd say, well, I ain't had a lawyer at all. I mean, really? I didn't do that. And I was afraid I'd ask something that maybe would ruin us. And I asked a few little sweetheart questions, the same one that the district attorney had asked. I almost mimicked him. I wanted to be sure I kept him in the traces, you see, that not give him a chance to go off and tell anything else, because I thought maybe he knew some things the district attorney didn't know to ask him. I mean, he didn't blurt things out. If you didn't ask him, he didn't just say, yeah, and so, and then, he just went that way. Well, when court opened when court adjourned, Frank said, here, Mr. Byrd, I want to see you in my office. I didn't know what. I walked back there. He showed me a little pad, written on his yellow pad, the following. If Bob Byrd asks no questions, he is a great lawyer. If he asks safe questions, he's a good lawyer. And if he cross-examines and asks questions that causes the case to go to the jury, he's incompetent. And I fell in the middle, and court adjourned, and I argued a little bit about the law. When court opened at 2 o'clock, he dismissed the case. So the moral of that story is, don't just ramble around to hear your voice. Know where you're going and not destroy your case. I like to use the expression, as Sandra knows, I go home, going home and change my uniform. When you leave the law office, leave it. Leave it there. I go home and put on the raunchiest pair of breeches that my wife won't even let me take up in the house. I go down in my shorts and put them on in the basement. They're stiff where I worked in the Roses, and I turned into a human being. I used to say that when I turn in Greenwood Place, just to go up that little driveway, I'm turning into a human being again, a Jekyll and a Hyde. I'm a different person by night than I am by day. I'm as meek as a lamb, do all the chores, and go to the grocery store, and never raise my voice to my wife in my life, just go on and live life. But I'd say to you, take off your ties, Tom, when you go home. Put on, you're out there where you can really live. I wish I lived out there where you did, but my wife can't drive and I can't drive. I envy you. I wish I lived out there.
Visit, I'll put you to work.
Well, I know. But change your uniform and put that behind you. And Molly, your husband's interested in you, but he's not interested in all the things. He's not interested in the Smith and Thompson case and all that kind of stuff. So maybe just in passing say I took on a good case they didn't want to. Bob Byrd talked me into it. Just leave it there. I think that's important to you. And don't worry about your matters. Don't lay there and sleep and worry about what's going to happen tomorrow. The world ain't going to come to an end, whatever happens tomorrow, in my opinion. The hardest thing you're working on, the most distasteful thing you're working on, do it first thing in the morning. Get it behind you. Don't let it lay on your desk. You're looking at it every time you talk on the phone or work something and you see that file. Work on it and get that behind you. Get that out of your mind and out of sight so that you can work on the other thing. See, all we lawyers need 4 or 5 files, Peggy, that we wish we didn't have to make us appreciate the other files we do have. And we've all got them. I've got my share of them, still have, and I will have till I hang it up. Going to court. Try to be on court on time and be in your seat, particularly Superior Court. They're more lax in District Court. You can call the district attorney and say you'll be there at 10 o'clock, or say I represent A, B, and C, and then district attorney in District Court, you know, Gary will announce Bob Gage is attorney. But Superior Court, man ought to be there and be seated in his seat. When the judge walks in, I always try to be there sitting in my little seat, my little hands folded, my little blue suit on. When the judge walks in, and the clients feel more secure. If you start walking over there at 4 to 10, they've been over there since 9, they go early, and they ain't seen their lawyer anywhere. And so be on time and be ready. And when they ask you if you're pleading in a criminal case, say it used to be before the jury, that's where I learned. You now do it for arraignment, you know. I'd always say, not guilty, ready for trial, Your Honor, just like we had the best defense known to man to start off with. And the jury get to hear that in the olden days. That sounds good, yeah. We're going to have a real trial here. I might negotiate one later, but that started off on the right foot, so did they? I sometimes feel like, boys and girls and men and women, I'm a lawyer referral service. I'll bet you that the day doesn't go by any day that I don't get from 6 to 10 or 15 calls from lawyers from Winston to Asheville or to Raleigh about cases or about clients. It's unreal. And a lot of them come from clients who are not happy with some of the members of the Burke County Bar. It's not because the lawyer's necessarily right or wrong, but people are just that way now. They're wanting action. They're wanting results now. I mean, right now, it's things the lawyer can't even do. They want it, I'm telling you, they want it now. They can't understand it takes time and all that. But beware of somebody that refers you a case for you to take over, or a client that's dismissed their lawyer. Now, we've had a couple there where we've come out and done all right, but you shake them up in the bag, 90% of them will be a headache with you too. And the client's expecting something that's impossible that you know you can't get. So beware of taking a case that somebody else has withdrawn from. Because it's usually a problem with you too, or a problem the client wouldn't listen to good advice of the other lawyer. I've always believed in telling the clients the truth, even when they don't want to hear it. If you don't tell a fellow that's in trouble what kind of bad trouble he's in, and talk about what all you're going to do, friend, if you don't do that and better, he's going to think you ain't worth a damn the rest of his life. You've got to let them know the seriousness of their case. My brother Joe used to say in those serious homicide cases, the first time I met with him, that we'd be fortunate if he didn't go to the electric chair. And as the thing went on better, well, I got him prepared. Well, the clients will work better if they realize the seriousness of the case. You tell a fellow, I'll take care of this. We've 2 witnesses over here. You got a good chance of winning this case. He won't cooperate. He won't go do the things you tell him. He'll just lay it all on your back. You've got to make him aware it's his case, and he's got to help you with it. And that is the truth. If your vibes tell you not to take a case, if your vibes tell you, after you talk to a client, or maybe it's going to come back in a day or two, if your vibes tell you not to take it, don't overrule your vibes. Let your vibes be the judge and don't take it. There's plenty of other lawyers. You don't have to take every case that comes to you. I try to, and my vibes have been overruled a few times, much to my displeasure, but that'll happen to all of us. A few more little tidbits before I take off. In civil cases, a good idea, if you don't know the lawyer on the other side, either the complaint or the answer, if you don't know him or don't know, maybe know his name, maybe one of these fancy elevator lawyers from Charlotte or Raleigh with a long name and file every kind of discovery known to man, and you look him up in Martindale, Hubble, find out about him or her, find out where he went to school, if he's lived in law review article, kind of memorize that. I always cut it out and put it in my phone here. And then when you meet him for the first time, you do all the talking about him or her, and you make some congeniality between you. Everybody likes to hear their horn tooted, He that tooteth not his own horn, the same shall not be tooted. And I think that's so important to know something about the fellow. You might find that he was a Rhodes Scholar. You might find his law review that you're not messing with a guy that's an Nincompoop. You need to know those things. And look up his rating and just kind of know that's who your opposition as lawyer is, not your opposition in the lawsuit. The clients are. But I think that's good advice to do. Just it takes a minute to do it. What I say nearly every day, Michelle, DIN, what's it stand for? D-I-N.
Do it now.
Do it now. And I learned from Larry. Dear, what's D-I-R stand for, Larry?
Do it right.
Do it now and do it right. Do it right now and do it right. That's a good admonition for all of us to have in the practice of law. Don't postpone it, do it now, but do it right, so you don't have to recook it. In your mediations, more than arbitration, because you don't have as many arbitration, the key, Doug, I think, in successful mediation of a case is not the rapport with the lawyer on the other side. They're just now patsies. They're just messenger carriers. They don't get to use their judgment, Bob, as you know now. The insurance companies are calling the shots. The person you want to influence is the insurance adjuster. Most of them are ladies. That's the person you need to have a camaraderie with. That's the person that you want to sell your case to. So always remember that. Don't be hostile, particularly to the insurance adjuster. You can kind of be hostile to the lawyer, kind of a little bit, kind of confrontation, like two little bandy roosters, you know. But zero in, look them in the eye, and when they bring up something you don't agree with, let them tell it. Well, so yeah, that's understandable. I'm kind of aware of that point. I know it's not black and white. Just kind of soothe them along, and you might get a whole lot. You might sell your client's injuries or your civil case whatever a little bit better than you would otherwise. You get a lot more things with a carrot than you can with a stick. I remember in the 3rd grade, Ms. Louise Reed was my teacher. She had us read the story of the wind and the sun. It's a story about a beggar man walking along the road. Had an old coat on, carrying his little, like Mud Mitchell used to do here in Burke County, little stick, his bag on the back. And the wind and the sun had a fuss or a contest to see which one of them could make him take off his coat. Well, the wind blew and the wind blew with all power. And of course, that made him put his coat even tighter. Then the sun came in, the sun came out nice and warm, and off takes his coat. So congeniality is better than blowing at something, in my opinion. A sole practitioner sometime, Russ is a sole practitioner. Doug is, Tom is. Wish he was still back down there in the melting pot or the furnace where I work, but he opted to go on his own, and wisely so. One of my best friends, and I want to say this about Tom Black. Tom will know it's true. I told Tom to put together the papers about his severance from the law firm, and I'd sign them. He did. I read them later. Now that's honor among lawyers, isn't it? That day may be gone now, but I've always remembered that, Tom. And I thank you for those several $1,000s more that you were entitled to that you didn't ask for. I'll tell you a story about a sole practitioner. True stories, true incidents. And I was appearing for Great Lakes Carbon all those time before the Utility Commission. Duke's biggest customer was Great Lakes Carbon. Our power bill was $8 or $10 million a year, so a little bit of percentage there was mega bucks. I made friends with the Duke Power people because I didn't fuss with them about their service. We didn't need it. We had our own power line. We didn't have any Duke people coming out to Great Lakes Carbon, so I didn't have any complaint about service. Now, I didn't tell everybody that we had our own line forward in there, but I'd always help them. I was on their side on service. What great service. You know, a lot of the residents involved in other little businesses are always, I mean, this is about service as well as rates. Well, I was just interested in the rates. So I made friends with the Duke Power president, went out to dinner with him, and over a period of 2 or 3 years and those things, he thanked me, Carl Horn and Bill Grigg, for helping him out with the service, and I kept telling them the thing, the economy of scale. The more you buy, you ought to get it cheaper. And we were able to get that curve leveled off and save some money. We had one controversial full rate case. Jimmy will remember the name. He wasn't with us, but I'm sure he read it since he's down there. He's probably read every rate case since the member of man runs off the contrary by now. A young lawyer over about Burke, a young fellow appeared to be 28, 30 years old. I was about 45 at the time. He represented one little business over there, little old stores. I mean, his money wouldn't have been more than $200 or $300 or a year, maybe $300 a year. His rate would go up on a certain point. And ours was millions, so his was minuscule. And we got the order back, and it was pretty painful to the big industry at that time. He came to me, he says, Mr. Byrd, he says they're wrong on this point. Says they're wrong, they mention it, but they're wrong. He says, my client hadn't got enough money for us to be at the Supreme Court. But says, I'll tell you what I'll do. If you'll put up the money, your client will put up the money, we'll file an appeal to the Supreme Court, just the two of us, your client and mine, and says if we win, everybody gets a benefit of it, you know, it's not like others don't feel it. And he said, I'll do most of the work. I said, you're wrong. He put together a brief on that, just one point now, wasn't ramming up accepting everything, just on point A. We argued at Supreme Court, and we won it. Our client got back $332,000. Now that little fella, all these lawyers, we had about 20 lawyers over here on one side. Powerful lawyers, big law firms, you know. And that one little fella, that wasn't trained in utility law, but he just had sure that he was right and how right he was. So you never know. Sometime the best trial lawyer in Texas lives in Jasper, Texas. He's got a little building about half big as this room, made out of cinder blocks, in a little town about big as Drexel. Not bad. A couple things that occurred in court I share with you. Question: what's the first thing your husband said to you when he woke that morning? Answer: he said, "Where am I, Kathy?" Question: why did that upset her so? Because my name ain't Kathy, it's Susan. This is from transcripts now. And where was the location of the accident? Answer: approximately milepost 499. Question: and where is milepost 499? It's probably between milepost 498 and 500. All right? Talking to a young man who was 18 or 19 years age at the time. Question on cross-examination: did you blow your horn or anything? Answer: after the accident? No, before the accident. Answer: sure, I played 10 years in the high school band. Another question of a pathologist. No, the doctor. Now, doctor, isn't it true that when a person dies in his sleep, he doesn't know about it until the next morning? That's Another. So the date of the conception of the baby was August the 8th? Yes. What were you doing at that time? That's right out of the transcript. Question: can you describe the individual? This is a criminal case. He was about medium height and had a beard. Question: the prosecutor here: was this a male or a female? Question: is your appearance here this morning pursuant to a deposition notice which I sent to your attorney? And that's what's all I have time. No, this is how I dress when I go to work. Doctor, how many autopsies have you performed on dead people? That was the pathologist. Answer: all my autopsies are performed on dead people. And I want to close with this. Doctor, to a pathologist: before you performed the autopsy, did you check for a pulse? No. Check for blood pressure? No. Did you check for breathing? No. Then is it possible that this patient was alive when you began the autopsy? No. How can you be sure, doctor? Answer: because his brain was sitting on my desk in a jar. That's the question. But could this patient still have been alive nevertheless? Yes, it's possible. He could have been alive and practicing law. The law practice has changed a lot in 45 years, and I hope I can maybe come back in after my 50th year and say something to the bar. The day of carbon paper's gone. The day of the manual typewriter's gone. The day of answering the phone, you call the operator and say, "Number, please." Our old number was 255M. Now we have fax machines, email, computers. The whole world has changed in the practice of law. I'm the only person in the law firm that does not have a computer on his desk. I don't have one. Don't even know how to turn it on. Never have to turn one, the switch even on. I don't need to. I've got a human computer named Faye Petit who's proficient on it and sits outside my door. I don't use an intercom. I just holler and they can hear me halfway down the hall. Ain't you, Larry? They can hear me all the way to me and John. Faye, come in here. Come in here, hey? Right now. I mean, but I don't need one if you have somebody that's proficient. But to be a lawyer, and particularly ones coming out of law school now, Russ, they've got to be proficient in computers. There's no question about it, you can't cut it. John Erden's become proficient. He's 62 or 3 years of age. He really knows how to do them. I know nothing about it. But the law has certainly changed. I think it used to be the standing of a lawyer in Morgan or around in the mountain counties or even throughout the nation was based upon his activity in community affairs, his church work, his kindness to impoverished people, and not much emphasis based upon what kind of house he lived in or what kind of car he drove. I'm afraid now that image has become almost a trade rather than a profession, ladies and gentlemen. The quest to desire and to conquer and to end up with material things 5 or 6, 7 years seems to be the grab for younger students, young lawyers. I noticed in the Charlotte paper, I couldn't believe it, but it's real. Starting salaries now, Michelle, and I'm saying this because somebody might whisper it to you.
I think they hit the paper.
$100,000 green out of the law school if you pass the bar, and a little signing bonus. Isn't that incredible now? But they become slaves in those law firms, 70 or 80 hours a day. Bobby Irvin went down there, and he finally saw the lights. He's back with us and be with us, I think, the rest of his life. Jimmy never went. He didn't need to be blinded. But it's unreal. It behooves us to be involved in the community, to be something more than a lawyer that does legal things. All of us have so much training and so much God-given ability. We can use in things non-legal and make a difference in Burke County. I think we owe it to mankind or ourselves to do that. None of us are indispensable. We all have an ego so big it has to be massaged nearly constantly. And before I say that, before I close, because I've got to get going here quickly, in your practice each day, try to have some fun each day. Danelle, who's going to leave us, who's your daughter, I think she'll tell you that in the law firm there, in spite of the tension and the problems we have and clients, that we try to have a little fun each day, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, picking at each other or something, just a little fun each day so that your day is not just something that's total tension. I think you'll live better if you'll do that. Be kind to your staff. Sandra, I ain't as big a bear as I used to be. Now, you wouldn't work for me back when I was 45, you?
I remember.
Oh, well, I was a little older, but wasn't as bad, was it? You'll mellow after a period of time, but very seriously, the people that work for your staff, your secretaries, your paralegal, your office manager, they're human beings. They have lives to live just like we do. Show interest in their family. Show interest in them so that you know that you're interested in them as a human being. That may be worth more than a bonus check sometime, the fact that it makes their life at work better. And if they're happy at work, they'll do better work. We have a lot of food. Sandra makes a run down to Sam's about every 10 days and just brings that car loaded back, all the good stuff to eat. Now, our former manager, he thought he wouldn't bring much back. He'd just bring back a little bit something in the front seat. But keeping somebody on premises, you get about 40 minutes more work out of them. Might cost you about $2. But it gives a chance to talk with one another. And we have some fun in the lounge. You know, we just sitting there, we have a rule. John Irving won't go by it, but we're not going to talk about any cases in here. I mean, like yesterday, had pizza brought in. You need a time each day that you kind of refresh your soul and know you're in a group or by yourself or the secretary that cares about one another. So that's so important. I never leave the law firm without telling my secretary, I appreciate your work today. I thank you. It's been a hard day or it's been a good day. Always thank your personnel for what they're doing for you. I often stop at the front of you, Sanders, you know, whoever's out there, and I thank them. Because that's so important, because we can't go without a staff. You can't run that. It's like the coal that goes in the old Southern Railway engine. You just can't go without somebody helping. You can't do it all yourself. And so that's so important. I want to close the poem, The Indispensable Man. It's a coincidence. The fellow that's taking his 15-passenger van to haul me up to Indianapolis today is John Green at Bowers Green Motor Company. He gave this to me, and it's framed, and you go inside my door, and back door you'll see it. Larry's right next to the nicest note that you ever penned to me. And I was inducted into the Hall of Fame, country lawyers, you know. He wrote me, says, thanks for showing me the practice of law, and more importantly, the practice of life. I see that thing every afternoon, Larry, and I even stop and look at it. That's the best note that I ever received anybody in my life. That little note you wrote in your own little handwriting on Larry D. McNamara. And that's the ultimate, I think. Indispensable man. Sometimes when you're feeling important, sometimes when your ego is in bloom, sometimes when you take it for granted you're the best qualified in the room. See, Russ, you're a doctor and you're the best qualified. You know that in your mind. Sometimes when you feel that you're going will leave an unfillable hole, just follow these simple instructions and see how it will humble your soul. Take a bucket with water and take a bucket, fill it with water. Put your hands in it up to your wrist. Pull it out, and the hole that remains is the measure of how you be missed. You can splash all you wish when you enter. You can stir up the water below. But stop and think, and you'll find that in no time, it looks quite the same as before. The moral of this quaint example is just do the best that you can. Be proud of yourself, but remember, there's no indispensable man. I thank you and wish you all Godspeed.
Thank you very much, Bob. And I know he has to leave, but there are just a few matters I think I'm missing. Richard,